Hi, this is Addison Shonland. It is December the 13th, 2021. My guest is Pratik Chandok, who is a technical services manager at Neste, a company that produces SAF and renewable diesel. SAF is the big thing these days, Pratik.
Hi, Edison. Thank you for having me, first of all. Yes, it
So,
seems like every day doesn't go by without something about SAF in the news. Either airline flying it, or it's flying 100% SAF, or some cargo airlines taking it. So it's all over aviation at the moment.
so tell us about Neste.
So Neste is a Finnish oil refining company that has been producing renewable fuels for a very long time, and they've been producing renewable diesel at the moment, and we are the largest producer of renewable diesel. And since 2019, I think, is when we first started big volumes of SAF. SAF is sustainable aviation fuel. It is very similar to jet fuel, but it's produced from non-renewable sources. So that's what we are really, I would say, really the masters of, is to take these kind of really bad feedstock like waste cooking oil, waste residues, used cooking oil, animal fat, for example, and taking them and converting them to these very high quality emission reducing fuels. Renewable diesel is one, and sustainable aviation fuel is our second product that offers those kind of benefits in the aviation specifically.
If I'm not mistaken, diesel and Jet A1 are quite similar, right? So the jump from renewable diesel to SAF from a chemical makeup it's not a big jump, right?
Yeah, it's not actually. They are very similar. They're both middle distillates, so they are produced in similar carbon range. Although I would say sustainable aviation fuel has more varied carbon chain than renewable diesel does. Renewable diesel is on the heavier side, and aviation fuels are on the lighter side. So, but they are very similar, and that's what the advantage we have is when we produce renewable diesel, we can take that and then produce SAF out of it. So it's pretty much very alike, and SAF just requires a little bit more processing, but in the end, you get a fuel that is purely hydrocarbon fuel.
Now, for people like myself who are, you play a journalist on the internet kind of thing, what is the difference between Jet A and SAF?
Well, not much actually. SAF has been designed to mimic jet fuel, so they are very similar fuels. The only differences you would see is we don't have SAF doesn't have aromatics, and aromatics is a chemical that you find naturally in crude oil, and these chemicals are then converted, and then they're found in the end product, jet fuel. And these aromatics are the reason why you have issues with emissions like particulate matter and soot and smoke. But SAF doesn't have these, and it doesn't have sulfur, so which is what causes sulfur dioxide emissions in jet fuel.
Right.
So what we've done is taken the best of jet fuel and taken out the bad part of it. So if you think about it, and but it's basically they are, I would say, 80 to 90% similar, except
Right.
for these chemicals, different chemicals.
So the benefits of SAF are basically you've got the useful stuff and you've got rid of the worst stuff, not all of the
Yeah,
bad stuff, but the worst stuff.
exactly, exactly.
Now, it obviously we've seen in commercial aviation, certainly since the most recent IATA conference in Boston, this incredible push towards this magical word sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And there's constant news, as you know, before we did the start of the recording, we were talking about SAF is in the news all the time, but it's also hydrogen. There's a hydrogen electric, hydrogen cells. It's fascinating to see how the stuff is mushrooming. But the truth is, I think, and I don't think it's really understood well enough, that commercially sustainable aviation has to start with SAF. It doesn't have to
And
start with something else. It must start
that's,
with SAF.
I think that that's a really good point, Edison. And these technologies that you mentioned, hydrogen, battery, electric, it's not that I don't like them. I think they're great. But can we wait 10, 20 years for these technologies to be available commercially? And to be able to scale these commercially is also a challenge. If you can imagine hydrogen being ported to an airport or an aircraft that is completely modified, what do you do with the existing infrastructure, right? So there's not only the issue of how long it's timeline wise, and what investments do we need to put in place in the infrastructure to accommodate these new technologies. And what same with electric, I'm so happy to see these electric planes being actually in the short haul segment, at least a small segment, have started to electrify, and I think that is needed. That is great, but I don't foresee how electric battery, for example, how can it be in an aircraft, a long haul aircraft, a 777 or 747 or 787. So I think we're still quite a while away from battery technology evolving to be able to power these aircrafts without sacrificing weight. But SAF is ready right now. It is being produced right now. Apart from Neste, there's another producer that makes it, and then there's a lot more announcements in the news. Heard recently that there, a lot of big investments going into production of SAF, and I think everybody realizes, industry realizes that SAF offers an immediate solution. You don't have to change your infrastructure. You don't have to modify your engines. You can use the same infrastructure. For example, in San Francisco, that's what we're doing. We're taking an existing terminal, existing pipelines to the airport. All we are doing is sending that fuel blended. So SAF has to be blended with 50% with aviation jet fuel, but it is as nothing happened. So airlines don't have to change their procedures. They just do what they need to do to get the fuel, and all it is to supply to them. And that's the magic of this. It's essentially a drop-in fuel. So that is why there's so much hype about it. If it's used just in its neat form, like 100%, it can reduce your emissions up to 80% CO2 emissions. So it's very effective fuel. And I think the advantages it carries, the benefits it carries on not only on CO2, but non-CO2 emissions, being able to access the infrastructure, not requiring any changes. I think that all adds up to the benefits of why you right now see SAF being so popular.
So Pratik, that's all great and it sounds wonderful and it sounds like the silver bullet. But I think that people need to understand two producers worldwide.
Yep.
And as somebody explained to me in Boston at the AGM, that if all the world's productive capacity of SAF were made available to an airline, they could probably fly for one day. So, okay, the good news is that you're basically taking junk and turning that into fuel.
Yep.
So getting rid of junk and turning that into fuel sounds like a great idea. The problem is you're not doing it fast enough. Well, not you. The industry, the SAF production is nowhere near what's needed.
Mm. That is absolutely correct. I think with Neste producing, and we haven't even produced, we've maybe produced for 2-3 years at commercial scale, and we're already the biggest, largest producer in the world. So that just tells you that there's not a lot out there. For Neste's part, we have tremendous interest in putting a lot of investments into producing SAF with our refinery in Singapore. And then Rotterdam is coming up to speed. So by 2023, we are projecting 500 plus million gallons of SAF available. That's Neste.
For what period? 500 million gallons for how much time?
By 2023, we will start making that much.
500 million gallons per year?
Per year, yes.
That's not enough.
That's not enough. We understand that, and that's where we don't consider our, for example, World Energy or other players as competitors per se. We consider them our partners because even with all of us combined, we're not going to be able to make enough. So that's where I've seen encouraging signs from the oil majors, Shell, BP, sorry. They're all now investing and doing projects for producing SAF, and that's what it takes. I think a lot of the issues have been, Addison, is the policy side, and I'm going to hold up governments here to it because there's been over 100 years of subsidizing of oil industry. So there's billions, not trillions of dollars being put into oil subsidy. What is that oil doing? It's burning and producing more CO2 and killing our planet. But there's an issue when SAF producers ask for a subsidy to start their industry, and that's a problem. So that's what we're having right now is we have a unequal playing field. SAF does not generate as many credits as other renewable fuels, and that's something that needs to change. I think that's when you're producing like us, Neste, we have renewable diesel and we have SAF. A lot of the other producers are facing the same issue. Do they make renewable diesel, which gets you more value in the market than SAF? Because the government hasn't done that. They haven't put in the policies. They're not willing to put in the policies to make the level playing field for all fuels.
Mhm.
So for me, it's really important, and I'm seeing really good signs right now coming from the government policy making is either a SAF BTC, for example, that is being talked about right now in the U.S. federal government. But there's also globally a lot of initiatives being undertaken, mandates, more benefits. But we need to do something. I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't been able to get the fuel out there. And technically, there's 7 pathways available. So it's you can make fuel 7 ways, but it's basically trying to figure out what can we do to make incentives to make producers want to make this fuel. And I see if that government policy comes in and initiatives come in, that kind of signals to investors that okay, this industry is stable, it's going to be supported, so we will want to invest. So it does not only impact the producers in terms of supplying the fuel, but also investors are investing in these investments and trying to get this fuel out there. So I think it's a double advantage there, just because of the policy making side can improve. And I do see signs of it, but we need more of it. So.
Pratik, do you have any idea of how much Jet A1 gets consumed on a daily basis for the commercial airline industry? Do you have a number on that?
I would have to probably in billions of gallons, but I don't have.
Yeah, my concern is I've used this term before when I speak to people, and I have to be careful because I don't want to offend anybody. But there's so much virtue signaling going on about clean aviation. Like, what does that mean? No one's going to be able to deliver this. And you get senior people looking earnestly into a television camera saying, 2050, it's going to be great. That person is going to be one of two things: retired or no longer alive. They are never going to be held to that promise. Their grandchildren will be held to that promise if their grandchild is running an airline. And that grandchild might not appreciate what the grandparent was saying. It's so important. It's so important that people get a grip on this. That, I was speaking to a senior person at Pratt & Whitney Canada, and she was explaining to me how they spent $100 million to improve the fuel burn on a turboprop engine by 1%. $100 million to improve that 1%. That's how much people are squeezing energy out of an atom of fuel. It's not like people aren't trying to do this. 40% of running an airline is fuel burn.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And all of those points are valid, and I think 25th, we have to set a goal. And I hope with the IATA setting the 2050 goal, at least we have something to shoot towards. Now, in terms of responsibility and owning that target is a different thing. But what I've seen is as I worked through a lot of the airlines, and man, they're really excited about it. They have asked for this. They're demanding this fuel, and they're really committed to it, which is good to see. They're not in here just for PR purposes or just greenwashing. They're actually buying fuel, and they're very much committed to getting to those 2050 goals that IATA has set, for example. So I think with a lot of these airlines now that are and plus to say that every gallon of SAF that we have produced has been sold. So just to show you that there is commitment. Now I see that there's a difference. There's a commitment from airlines. Those are the main players. Those are there's still the cost. There's still an issue with cost, and it is more than jet fuel. And but with that's where I went the policy making to be able to get those incentives to bridge that gap. So an airline which 40% of their business is 40% of their business 40% of their costs is fuel burn. So for them, cost is really important. Price is really important. So
Pratik, is SAF still, how long does SAF stay at 4 times the price of jet fuel? How do we get that to come down?
there's a couple ways to do it. Well, I mentioned the first way, which is government policy making to bridge the gap, and that what that offers is scale. So as you grow and grow your refinery, you get more and more volume. You realize some cost savings there. But I can say that majority of the fuel will still be expensive than jet. Even if you put the economies of scale in, even if you get the government policy in, it's because the feedstock is so expensive. If you think about the feedstock that is being used, it can vary quite a bit. And for example, HEFA, the feedstocks that we use, can be 2-3 times more than jet fuel price. So even if you apply the scale, even if you get the government policy, the feedstock is still quite expensive. So I don't think I don't think we will ever reach parity of jet fuel unless we are able to use these feedstocks that are like CO2, for example, or municipal solid waste, which is negative cost at some point. But the feedstock issue is still there, and that's another big situation is where do we get all the feedstock as well.
So one thing that occurs to me is that, of course, if you're talking about public policy, that is a very blunt instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you might see governments say, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll add a dollar tax per gallon to jet fuel, and that dollar tax in jet fuel on jet fuel will be now pushed into SAF production. So there's really a transfer of value. But the problem is, someone like me who wants to fly somewhere, I'm going to get nailed.
That's a very good question. So a very good point actually. I would say that the tax itself, what do you do if jet fuel, you're burning jet fuel, right? So if your CO2 emissions are increasing and you get this hurricane comes through and just blows everything away, that's a lot of damage that carbon emissions have done. So when you think about pricing of a jet fuel versus SAF, do you think about jet fuel at 260 a gallon, or do you think about all the other additionalities, the negative externalities that fuel has caused? So what is the total cost of it? So if you look at that way, then does paying $1 a gallon a tax?
Well, I tell you what. Firstly, if you're going to go down that road, it's a bit of a black box. We will spend the rest of our days together fighting over what the value is of each of those little inputs or outputs, whatever they are, right? And there's no point in that. So the fact is, I can hear a valid argument made that we have built an economy around fossil fuels and enabling fossil fuels close to 100 years. Mm-hmm. They have got an economy of scale. Mm-hmm. They've got it down. Mm-hmm. And to expect renewable fuels or sustainable energy to accomplish that in 5 years or 10 years, that's pie in the sky.
Yep.
The fact is, though, we're talking about 2050, which gives us a good half century.
Yeah.
And we're going to have, there's going to have to be some, I don't know, some miracles, some magic that's going to have to happen here to enable commercial aviation to be clean as possible. But I can't see it being weaned completely off Jet A1 by 2050.
Yeah, I think I'd like to continue to say that um, even with the jet fuel and the advantages it has in terms of being available, cheaper, it's the demand from airlines. What we see happening is changing. So we are getting the demand shift. We are getting that signal from companies, airline companies, that they really want to use the SAF. I think they are willing to forgo jet fuel for this SAF. So I think it's a matter of time. I think it's a matter of time that 2050 we can achieve the goal. We can get to those numbers. I think with the demand rising, with the incentives that are coming through, like SAF BTC offers up to $1.75, $2 a gallon per fuel. I think that's really mechanisms that are getting put in place, that we need to scale. That's what we need to get to. We need to get to those big volumes so we can realize the same advantages that fossil fuels have, like you said, over 100 years now. But we are so small that we need help. And I think with the airlines coming in with their demand, and the government actually looking into how we can support this industry, grow this industry, because everybody realized that SAF is the solution that is available now, and it can reduce your emissions. So, and I think that the coupled with all of these different things, I think we can get there. I think 2050, yes, jet fuel will be there, but I think there's be a lot more SAF also in 2050 as well.
A last thought that crossed my mind before I let you go, because I'm sure you've got other things to do. It occurs to me that, you know, life is a strange thing where when you enable something, it creates vested interests.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have a situation where there are very established vested interests, and now we're going to move someone's cheese, and that's not going to be something that goes without some resistance. However, if we look at the countries that are the source for Jet A1, the fossil fuel market, and we look at places that could be generating SAF, I'll give an example, Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an incredible boost to their economy to become a SAF producer, although they have some oil offshore, and we've seen them actually lose an oil rig sinking, and we've seen pollution on all kinds of levels. But SAF production could actually be a boon to several African economies that don't have anything else that they could be exporting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of upside here that I don't think people talk enough about.
Yeah, that's right, Addison. And I think you brought up a very good point that these traditional non-oil producing regions have now found could use their natural resources, and the waste that they produce to actually build another economy, build a source of revenue for the governments, and in turns allow people to work, have options to work in a green economy, green jobs. And I would like to say that all of the oil producers can use their assets. They have assets that they can utilize and produce SAF out of it. So it offers a option. It's not like you have to like break down everything and then start new. You have existing assets that can be reused, and I think it offers it offers a way to stimulate the economies of, like you were saying, Africa and other nations, where you could actually make SAF out of waste, and all you need to do is invest in the technology and be able to do it. But that it creates jobs, and that's that's one example I have for Neste. Is we've done the same thing here. We in Houston, we have a partner that used to make renewable fuel, fossil, was in the fossil industry, making fossil products. And we took took over that asset and helped them make green jet fuel out of it. So it really is something that they really were able to switch to. It created more revenue and income for them, and kept people employed. So it's a really great way to be able to keep the economy and add a revenue source for the economy as well. So
Pratik, this has been a fascinating conversation. You give me a bit more hope than I had before we spoke. I hope we can speak again.
yeah, likewise, Addison. It was really nice to chat with you today.
Thank you.